Hello, welcome to the Future Film Podcast.
This week we're talking about rock hammers and 5 football fields.
Enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome back to the Future Film Podcast. I'm Kyler.
I'm Ethan.
I'm Michael.
And this week we have some unfinished business to take care of. Ethan, you are getting punished.
Yeah.
Ethan,
okay.
You lost the game from last episode, and you need to share your unpopular movie opinion with us.
My unpopular movie opinion. All right, y'all ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. So, I think Ant-Man is the most superior Avenger in the entire MCU. I have my reasons. Film Theory did a video on it. It's because the science of it doesn't necessarily make sense. And if you look at to how Ant-Man really is, he should even be stronger and faster and even more powerful. You just have to go watch it. Like, shout out to Film Theory on YouTube. He's literally one of the best. And the science of it is very intelligent. In summary, it's like you can't lose mass, so it doesn't make sense for him to be light when he's small and so on and so forth. But so that's it. My unpopular movie opinion. What are y'all gonna do about it?
Oh gosh. So you think he's stronger than Iron Man?
The most superior. Like, I'm not saying Iron Man is like a bad villain. I think Ant-Man's superpower is the most superior out of the entire MCU.
Okay, so who would win in a fight, Ant-Man or the Hulk?
Ant-Man or the Hulk? Oh, Ant-Man. He says, going after that whole Thanos meme, all he has to do is shrink down.
Oh.
Okay, no. I've watched a video about that too. And actually, if you look at how he goes back from small to big throughout the MCU, he actually is pretty unpredictable of how his force works. So like there are times when he'll come back from being small to big, like in his movie when he's underground in the ant pile and then he freaks out and he goes back to being human size. He pops up out of the ground like it was no problem. But doing the science and studying the actual human like intestines, his force, whenever he expands back to human, he wouldn't be able to expand, like he wouldn't tear through the human intestine, much less a Titan intestine. So there you go.
I still have my beliefs, but that's okay.
Well, they're unpopular. So
well, thanks, Kyler.
You're welcome.
Before we actually start into the pod, I want to actually give a shout out to Jonathan Snyder and Sonia Terry for guessing our movie for today. But before we even get into that, Kyler, do you want to share something with us?
I do. I want to talk about our weekly Star Wars fact. This is kind of a two-parter. So George Lucas, whenever he was making Star Wars, the original Episode 4, A New Hope, back in 1970, 74 through 77, he created a special effects studio called Industrial Light and Magic to take care of all the special effects on the movie. They did everything. Any laser blasts, any dog fights, any like when the Death Star exploded, they blew it up. And so not only have they done the special effects for Star Wars, but they've grown. They've also done the special effects for Marvel movies, even Transformer movies, and beyond that. Now, that's not the main fact, but another cool aspect of ILM is that since the technology for the special effects Lucas wanted didn't exist at the time, they had to create it. So ILM built a robotic camera. They called it the Dykstra Flex, for its main developer, John Dykstra. And this camera was made to move around the model spaceships and create the illusion of flight rather than moving the models. So yeah, they had to create everything themselves. It was really, really cool. So there's your Star Wars fact of the week.
Nice.
That's awesome. I didn't even know that.
I know, really, it's pretty cool, isn't it? Let's move on to our movie of the week, shall we?
So the movie of the week is Shawshank Redemption, which, oh my freaking goodness. I love this movie so much. for those who do not know, it's about a prison called Shawshank. So they come to Shawshank, and it's about a guy who was framed for a murder that he didn't do. And as you go out through the entire movie, you learn a lot about his character. He's a really quiet guy, and he really keeps to himself, which, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, it turns out that he's been digging this hole for 20 freaking years with a little hammer, which goes with our intro.
The rock hammer.
The rock hammer. And he had to crawl through sewage for like 500 yards, the length of 5 football fields, which is the quote from last week. And it's so good. Like, literally, the ending was so good. I don't want to go on too much, but like, it was a happily ever after ending, and you got to see prison life. And throughout the movie, he's a really smart man. Like, and then he becomes friends with the Warren, and he starts doing his taxes, and he's starting to like basically build his relationship with all the guards and everything. But eventually a new guy comes to jail, and he's like, yo, your story is innocent, and I know why. And another spoiler alert, you're going to get a bunch of those. I'm just going to let you know in advance.
I think it's been out long enough to, not have to say spoiler alert.
That's true. I just try not to ruin it because it was such a good movie.
Well, I mean, it's going to get ruined. It's been out for 20 years, I guess, something like that.
Yeah. So the guy comes in with this information, and the Warren hears about it. The Warren gets mad, and so he calls the guy out beyond the gates, and then he offers him a smoke, and then he says, would you testify that this is true? He says, well, yes. And the guy kills him in cold blood. A man that, oh my gosh, I'm so flustered because he's so knowledgeable when it comes in Bible stuff. You get to see that when he comes to the jail, he's like, all right, there are 2 things I care about.
Wait,
the Bible.
Who are we talking
and
about?
Discipline. The Warren, I'm sorry.
The Warden, okay.
And he kills his man in cold blood. And then he keeps the innocent guy who he that was framed in jail just so that he can keep doing his taxes for him because he made him a lot of money. When in reality, toward the end of the movie, he was just setting himself up so that when he broke out of jail, he gave himself another life through that without anyone knowing. It was such a good movie. And then you get the happily ever after, which was, So that was my intake on the movie. It was just very moving and very powerful. Definitely rated R to say the least, but It was so good. I highly recommend it. What did you think, Michael, on the movie?
All right, so as I've told y'all before, my less favorite movies are prison movies. I went to go see, I believe it was called The Mustang, and I think it was released in the last, couple years. And I was not thrilled by that movie. It was, I think it's the gore, like the specific style of gore.
Okay.
It's not appealing to me. Like I can sit there and watch any horror movie and watch somebody get ripped in half and be fine. But I think it's when it comes to a little bit more like closer to home, like
realistic.
Yeah, when that's actually happening and that could happen, that's where it's like, well, that kind of crosses the line for me, and it's like it almost becomes too real.
Are you talking about like the sisters and stuff like that?
So that, and there's also a scene in the Mustang where a guy gets literally shanked to death.
Oh, gosh.
And it was like, he's bleeding out and stuff, and it's just like, that's where I'm like, okay, I'm about to walk out of the movie theater. This is too realistic for me. This is not what I enjoy watching. But
so,
yes, tying back into the movie, the sisters, that was like, I don't think anybody.
Do you want to explain who the sisters are, just so that
explain that.
Okay, so I think it was a group of what, like 3 or 4 people?
It seems like it was 3,
heterosexual.
Yes,
heterosexual.
And well, he said that Morgan Freeman, towards the beginning of the movie, was telling Andy Dufresne, the main character of this movie, that the sisters have taken a liking to him, and that Morgan Freeman could tell, or Morgan Freeman plays Red And it just kind of was a running thing until his first encounter where he was asked to go get some more stuff for the laundry room, and the sisters were there to ambush him. And for lack of a different term, take him.
Fair
And
enough. Yeah.
yeah.
That's one way to put it.
And it was one of those things where Morgan Freeman, he's the epic narrator. His voice is known for narrations everywhere.
Yeah.
He was one of those, or he made the quote. I wish I could tell you that he fought them off and they weren't able to do anything to him, but life isn't a fairy tale and stuff happens. So, and that was like, whoa, I know it happens, but that's really, really tough,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
so basically, he's got gained up on, to say the least.
yes,
Yeah.
literally. And moving on for a little bit more darker aspect of this movie, there's a lot of good stuff to come out of it, because he does move past all the stuff. He eventually fights off the sisters, because he's kind of gotten in good with the, I guess, the management, so the warden and his staff. They kind of protect him because he's giving them a service, which is taxes and financial
Assistance.
There we go. Yes. So it does move on, and kind of piggybacking on Ethan's statement of he's a really smart man. That's all I could think through the entire movie, especially at the end, because I don't know if y'all know, but I do collect rocks, quite a few of them, and
What a dork.
Yeah, I know, right? For him
Odd flex, but okay.
For him to find quartz and soapstone and alabaster in that courtyard, that's something else. Like, that takes almost a trained eye to be able to recognize, especially in its rough form. Then it just the whole setup of, he knew exactly what he was doing as soon as he started like carving names in the wall, or I guess those words. I'm sure they were names.
They were names, yeah.
But as soon as
his cell.
As soon as he started making that A, and he did a downstroke with the hammer, and that huge piece of wall came tumbling off, that was just a light bulb moment, and he was like, "Yep, I'm getting out of here."
Yeah.
So I think that was just it was the best, one of the best master plans I've seen in a while. And I think that's what made it watchable for me. Just because I like seeing everything like that unfold, because I mean, you have to be really, really smart to create a fake identity, literally create a person without them ever being in existence, and then actually executing on your plan. So what did you think about it, Kyler?
Okay, so I'm the only one in this group that's seen it before, and honestly, my first thought was like, when I was watching it, I kind of thought, man, having seen this before really kind of ruins the surprise. But then as I kept watching it, I changed my mind about that. And I'll get to that in a minute. But like, this movie is just a freaking good film. The cinematography is wonderful. The sound design is great. And the story is phenomenal. In the opening scene, the very first thing you see is this man sitting in his car, and it's Andy, the main character, but he's sitting in his car, and you see him reach over to the glove compartment and pull out a gun and start loading it, and then you see a bottle, and there's no dialogue, and you just know something bad is about to happen or has happened. You see those two things together, and you just know. So this movie did a really good job of the rule, show, don't tell. And that's what you're supposed to do with film. You're supposed to show, don't tell. If you have to tell everything, it kind of ruins the point of the movie. right? If you have this 2-hour movie, you know, and this main character goes through all this trial and tribulation, and then you have to explain what happened in a monologue at the end, you've really kind of missed the point of the movie, right? The movie is supposed to teach you, not the words. So they did a really good job of saying show, don't tell, or not saying, but like doing show, don't tell at the beginning of the movie. This movie, for those of you who don't know it, it's actually based on a Stephen King short story. And Stephen King, he's had many movies made many books made into movies. But one thing I've always thought of when it comes to books made into movies, it's very hard to make a good adaptation, because when you read the book, there's so much more time to invest in the characters. You know, you see a lot more character development, and you just can't get that in a 2-hour movie with a cast of 40. You know, like if there's so many main characters in a book, you can't always do a good job with the adaptation because there's too little time. But I want to know what was left out of this movie, because it seems too concise a story to be taken from a book. You know, like the only other movies that I've seen that I'm impressed that were books first were Harry Potter, and like even then I know that they changed from the books eventually. The first 4 were pretty on point. Past that, I know it was different, but still, the Shawshank Redemption did a wonderful job of telling a complete story without having that feeling of, okay, there's supposed to be more here, and I'm not getting it, you know? So a couple film things that I noticed, like at the beginning of the movie, the camera is showing this wide shot of Shawshank from above. You see all the prisoners, all the inmates moving to the gate because they're, you know, bringing in the new guys. And the camera moves past this flag that's flapping in the wind. And first time I watched this movie, I didn't even pay attention to it. But it's like a split-second move. You hear the flag flap in the wind, and then it's gone. And honestly, I think if that noise, that sound effect hadn't even been in there, I wouldn't have ever noticed. I would have just accepted it. I probably would have put the sound in my own mind. Like, oh, there's a flag. Of course it's flapping. You know, there's that sound in the background. But they actually took the time for a split second to have that flag flap in the wind. Later, they did the same thing with when Brooks was carving his name into the wood on the ceiling. He was carving it, and it showed the dust fall from the wood onto his chair, and it made a sound. Like you could hear the wood dust, wood dust, sawdust. You could hear that hitting the chair and tapping on it. And I was just so amazed that they spent that much attention to detail. Okay, now I have to focus on this one part at the end. When they're showing how Andy escaped, they show some shots that do not make sense. Now, let me explain that. So when they show Andy escape, there's a shot in the prison, and it's all red. Like red is explaining how Andy got out. And so you're seeing what happens. Andy just like shined the warden's shoes, and he wears them back to his cell. And no one paid attention to it. Even like, and Red acknowledges that. How often do you look at a person's shoes, he says. And so he's wearing those shoes back to his cell. And once he gets to his cell, he unbuttons his shirt, and you see he's wearing a white button-up and a black tie. And then the very next shot is him like army crawling through the hole he's dug in the wall. But he's back in his prison shirt. And then after he gets out of the wall and he crawls through the 500 yards of that sewer line, he gets out, falls into the river. And in this triumphant moment, you know, the music swells and he like rips off his prison shirt, and it's this wonderful moment, and you're all in for it. But when he takes off his prison shirt, he's wearing a white t-shirt.
I noticed the exact same thing. It was kind of getting on my nerves.
Now, what's so interesting is that I didn't notice it the first time, I don't think. With
I
Red's
didn't notice at
narration,
all.
yeah, exactly. With Red's narration, and honestly, just the progression of the story, it doesn't need to make sense. The shots don't need to actually go in an order because the story is coherent. You know, like if you look at those all, if there was no narration and no music, you'd be really confused. If it was silent, it wouldn't make sense. But Red guides you through it, and even though that he never is shown in his white button-up and tie again until he's in a bank in another town, you still accept it. You still like, oh yeah, of course, he's wearing the warden's clothes. Of course, why not? This is how he becomes Russell Stevens or Randall Stevens later. You know, you just accept it. And it's so crazy that we do that we accept it even though it doesn't make sense. Now, lastly, my takeaway from this, the very end, you know, Andy escapes. He makes his way down to Zihuatanejo, where he's always wanted to go, you know, because he says the Pacific has no memory. And he wants to go there and just live out the rest of his days, fix up a boat, and just be there where no one can bother him. And he tells Red about that. And then once Red gets out and he remembers to go look for Andy, you know, he finally gets out there and he sees Andy on the beach. And it's this last shot is beautiful because it's not, you don't see their individual reactions necessarily. They go extremely wide. And you just see these two walk up to each other on a beach and just grab each other in this gigantic hug. And it's just a wonderful end to a movie, you know? Imagine the waiting, the hoping, and the questioning that Andy had to go through while waiting on Red. Like to think, my best friend's still in prison and I really hope he gets out one day because I really want him to come be with me. But you have no clue if that's ever going to happen. Like,
Mm-hmm. Or if he's just going to die in there.
Right. Red was serving out a life term, and Andy knew that, but he was just waiting in hope. And I just thought about this and I was like, think of the joy realized in Andy's heart when he sees his closest friend walking across the beach to him. It makes me, like, think about that. You've had those moments where you just see this person that you've been waiting for so long, a close friend coming up to you. And I imagine this is probably going to be what it's like after Corona, you know? We all go up to each other and just grab each other in this gigantic bear hug because we have been waiting and waiting and waiting. There's this Bible verse, I think it's Proverbs 18:24. I could be wrong, but I think it is. And part of that verse says that there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And that is exactly what you see at the end of this movie. You see two friends that stuck closer than brothers. And it is such a beautiful, joyful thing to have a friend like that. So that's what I took away from this movie.
Wow. That was really good.
So
you took me back to last night. I'm sorry. Just like, wow, how amazing the movie was.
It really is an amazing movie. I know we didn't go over everything, but man, check this movie out, guys. This is great.
If you're over the age of 18, because this is rated R, and if you're very skeptic of, you know, very what's the word, visually disturbing things, don't watch it.
Yeah, if you're easily disturbed, if you're squeamish, don't watch it.
Okay, let me be clear. It's not the worst when it comes to that. There's a little bit of blood. Oh, you know what? I have to mention two more things before I'm done, and then we'll get to our game in our after credit scene. But so let's go back to the sisters for a moment. The sisters are these group of guys who were beating up on Andy, and you know, it's never said, but they raped him. Like, it's what happened. They beat him up, they raped him, It was just a
Which
thing
I
that
have a
happened
question
to him.
about that.
Okay, that's odd.
So
but okay.
no, I know how that works. I'm talking about because what made that stuff stop. The Warren basically literally beat not the Warren, what's his name? Mr. Krabs.
Mr.
Jack
Krabs?
plays Mr. Krabs.
Hadley.
But he's the same actor who plays Mr. Krabs.
Oh gosh. Okay.
It is. Okay, anywho. He literally beat the living daylight out of him. But what was the reasoning behind that? Was it because of that?
Of course.
Like, I didn't know. It didn't give me like a full thing. Because you know how that specific, how Hadley could be. He would just beat the living crap out of someone just because he feels like it.
True, but
so
I mean,
didn't know
that
if it was like one of those
followed directly after the sisters beat Andy so bad that he ended up in the infirmary for a month.
Yeah, and that was kind of piggybacking off of what I was saying. I think that was like the biggest moment of relief for me, and I know it sounds bad that he got like beat to a pulp and
agreed 1,000,000%.
And then he became a vegetable after all of this.
You feel good when that happens, oddly enough.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's like
you got what you deserved.
Yes, definitely.
But so I agree with that completely. But I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a different direction. Whenever they were shown raping him, they never actually showed it, which I really appreciate, because there's this show on Netflix I watched once, and I only watched the first episode, and I stopped after it because of what I'm about to say. There was a show on Netflix where they actually showed a woman get raped by this man, and they didn't show any parts. They showed the action, and they did it in an artful way. They it was based in a Western setting, so like the man threw this woman's dress up over her head. She was out on a table, and you knew what was happening at that point. You saw his face, you saw her face, and at that point I was just really disappointed because I was like, there was no reason to show that. Like that, I understand, and they did it artfully. They did it where they didn't show anything, but it was just so sad to be like, why did that have to be shown? But I liked the fact that in this movie, it was not even shown, but it was implied, and you understood exactly what was happening.
So for all of the Game of Thrones listeners,
oh gosh, don't get me started on
yeah,
Game of Thrones.
don't let's not I don't want to trigger any of y'all, but
trigger warning, stop listening now.
This that is the exact reason I didn't watch Game of Thrones. I watched it all the way up until that point where she got raped. And I think, like I said, I think it's the stuff that can actually happen in real life that really gets to me. So when I got all the way up into that point to where she got raped, I was like, yep, that's it. Because I wasn't really into the show to begin with, but I was trying to muddle through it. And then when that happened, it just killed it for me. So I think with any show, just to get more views or viewers, watches, whatever you want to call it, you should be a little bit more tasteful about what you show and what you don't.
And that stuff is just nasty. Like, it's like there's really no point to it, like, at all. Yeah. And it makes my inside just like, ugh, like, I can't help. I have my own. Yeah.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Like, you're right. There's no point to show it so long as you can imply what's going on. People get the point,
Exactly.
Yeah, which is that's one thing that I really didn't appreciate the movie. But justice was done.
Yes. And
I am pleased.
Well, let's get to our game, shall we? We only got a few minutes left on our Zoom call. So let's do Name That Movie. But this week, we're doing Book Edition. So last week we did Name That Movie, and we did movies movies that Samuel L. Jackson had been in. This week we're doing Book Edition. So we're going to be going around in a circle, and all of us have to name a Stephen King book that has been adapted into a movie. And you can't repeat. If there's been remakes, you can't repeat it. Does that make sense? We all good?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm gonna put a timer on us too. We all got like a 10-second timer to come up with an answer. Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
So, all right, Ethan, you want to start it? When you start, I'll hit the timer.
Alrighty. So I'm gonna start off with It, the movie It, the horror movie.
Michael, you go.
Let's see here. Dr. Sleep, my favorite.
Okay. We're gonna go with The Shining.
Oh, well, that's about it, boys. Might as well stop the timer.
Oh, come on. There's so much more. 5, 4, 3,
I have no way.
2,
There's
1.
No way.
Can I phone a friend for him?
You know what? Go for it. Phone a friend.
Phone a friend.
Because, oh man, Pet Cemetery.
Ooh, good job. I was gonna go with that one. The Mist.
Carrie.
Oh my gosh. Hey, y'all keep going. I already lost, but keep going.
I'm helping Ethan. He's my bud in this one.
Oh my gosh.
We got another one. 5, 4,
Oh, The Green Mile.
3. Oh, frick. Okay. You know what? No one said it. Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, well, yeah. Cujo.
Frick. I lost. Ah, man. That's it. I don't know anymore.
Michael, keep going. I'm curious.
Yeah,
Keep
what else you
going.
got, Mike?
The Long Walk. Give me a second. There's another one. I was gonna go with Edgar Allan Poe's. What's it called? The Crow or something like that.
That is.
I know it's not.
Yeah, I was about to say that's not Stephen King.
Stephen King's Children of the Corn.
Dang it, you're right. I forgot about that one.
That was the only other one that I can remember off the top of my head.
Holy cow.
Man, there's a reason he's called the King of Horror.
Yes.
So.
Well, go you, Michael. I feel like you need to have a
Look at
reward for
you.
winning.
Man.
All right.
Well,
y'all decide my stupid punishment.
We will decide your punishment 2 weeks in a row, dude.
Oh my gosh. All right, because I already know that Kyler already forgot.
Sorry.
I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the characters. Literally, they introduce like Andy pretty close into the film, but I love when Red goes into more of a detailed explanation of like who his character is. At the beginning, Andy, as Kyler mentioned, was in a car with a bottle, blah 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 blah, and a gun. But when you actually get to know him, is when he first actually talked with Andy. Is when he was narrating, saying, Andy kept to himself at first. I guess he had a lot on his mind, trying to adapt on the inside. Was until a month went by until he finally opened his mouth to say 2 words to somebody. As it turned out, that somebody was me. And Red was the type of guy to where he would get you anything you ever want. And that was when Red was introduced, because as soon as he starts talking to him at the end of the conversation, he's like, my name's Red. And in the conversation, we'll learn that he's the guy that can get you everything. So it was a good way. They're both introduced very well immediately.
Wasn't Red introduced earlier though? Because he had his probation hearing, his parole hearing, and they called him Ellis Boyd Redding or whatever his name was.
I guess you're right, but but you don't know his name though. I don't think they said.
Yeah, they called him his name, didn't they?
I don't think so. I was listening for it because for me, that's like the first thing I look for in movies because I want to know who is who. So if they're like, oh yeah, me and Red were out in the yard last week, I could know who is who. So
okay.
I don't think so. But so yeah, that is it. All right.
Cool.
So
Cool.
On a side note, real quick, not relating specifically to this movie, unless it's in here as well, something for our film enthusiast, there's a thing called the Wilhelm Scream.
Oh, yeah, the Wilhelm Scream. This is like a running joke with any filmmaker.
Yes, okay. So I was introduced to the Wilhelm Scream in high school. I believe it was my last year, so my senior year. But my homeroom, if you will, teacher, he was like, there's this thing called the Wilhelm Scream, blah, 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 and he pulled it up. And he was like, it's in basically every action movie you could think of. And he showed us Star Wars. He showed us
Yep, that's a stormtrooper falling off the bridge.
Yes, a Fast and the Furious movie where there's a car flipping and somebody in the street is screaming. But it's a very distinct scream, and it started in 1951 with the film Distant Drums. I've never heard of that.
Neither have I.
But for all of y'all enthusiasts, keep an ear out for that. Go ahead and I guess we can edit it in post.
Oh, we're gonna edit it in post.
Put it
for sure. It's a blooper.
This is the scream. But okay, we can go ahead and finish with...
Well, actually, I'm going to side note on your side note. So in the recent years, Star Wars actually has started to not use the Wilhelm Scream, and they've started to do their own scream. Like I don't even know what it is because I can't distinguish it, but they have their own running joke now. This is, I guess, Star Wars Fact Part 3, but they have their own running scream now that they put in their movies that's different from the Wilhelm Scream that they initially did.
I didn't even know this existed, the Wilhelm Scream. Like, literally not at all.
They also do it in SpongeBob. Like,
yes,
they do it a lot. And then they're also in SpongeBob, they made their own running joke about the guy who goes, "My leg!" You know?
Oh, yeah.
So
that's funny.
I guess, yeah. But let's wrap this up, shall we?
So at the end of every podcast, you know what we got to do? We always do a after credit scene, and I'm going to go ahead and play that for you guys. In 3, 2, 1. All right, there you go. Try to guess that on all of our social media platforms, and you can get a shout out in the next pod. In the meantime, I'm Ethan.
I'm Kyler.
I'm Michael. Roll the credits.
The Warren basically literally beat not the Warren, what's his name? Mr. Krabs.
Mr.
Jack
Krabs?
plays
No.
Mr. Krabs.
Trigger warning, stop listening now.
You can not make that a blooper.
There's a blooper.
This is the scream.